Marianne held her breath as the last moving truck pulled away from the quiet cul-de-sac in which she'd spent 32 years of her life. The windows of her suburban home stared back at her like vacant eyes, emptied of laughter, arguments, holiday dinners, and sleepless nights. She had sold nearly everything: the antique oak dining set, the dusty piano William once tuned by ear, and the corner bookshelf that had once doubled as a hiding place for her children. The decision wasn't made overnight, but it was sudden all the same. At 68, Marianne walked away from everything. The moment her fingers left the keys she left in the mailbox for the new owners, her body trembled, not from fear but from release. She had held on so tightly for so long. To the past. To the image of who she thought she had to be. Widow. A mother. Neighbor. But never just herself. She drove north toward a town she had once visited with her late husband, where the lakes seemed to breathe with you, and the mountains cradled the horizon like wise elders. It was in Vermont, tucked quietly between the trees, where she found a one-room cabin. It wasn't perfect, wood needed patching, windows let the cold slip through, but it didn't carry the weight of memory. It was empty in the best way. Blank page. The first few weeks were nearly silent, save for the rustling of leaves and the creaking of unfamiliar floors. She found it hard to sleep. Not because she was frightened, but because her mind buzzed with long-neglected questions. Who am I without others to care for? What do I love when no one is watching? When had she last done something for herself, just for the simple joy of it? Mornings began with coffee on the porch, wrapped in a faded flannel robe she found at a roadside thrift store. She watched deer graze in the meadow across the dirt path and listened to a silence so thick it echoed. The absence of distraction was uncomfortable at first. She had spent decades filling silences with chores and obligations. But slowly, that silence began to speak. One rainy evening, Marianne found a box of watercolor paints in the attic. Likely left by the previous owner, they were brittle and faded but still usable. She hadn't painted since college, before the marriage, before the babies. It had once been her escape, a world where she could exist in color and texture, free from expectations. That night, she painted a bowl of apples sitting on the windowsill. It wasn't good, but it was hers. What followed was a quiet blooming. Her days took on rhythm. She painted in the mornings, hiked nearby trails in the afternoons, and read by candlelight when the power flickered during storms. The isolation, once terrifying, became comforting. She was no longer performing a role. She was living a life. Letters began to arrive from her daughter, Beth. At first, short notes of concern. "Are you okay out there? Do you need anything?" Marianne would reply simply, "I'm figuring things out." With time, the tone softened. They began sharing real thoughts, memories, confessions, even dreams. It had been years since they truly knew each other. One letter in particular arrived just after the first snowfall. Beth wrote, "I envy you. I don't know who I am anymore either." That sentence broke something open in Marianne. She realized that perhaps she hadn't failed as a mother by leaving. Perhaps she had shown her daughter something else, a path back to the self. Marianne eventually hosted Beth for a weekend. They cooked stew over the fire, walked through the pines, and cried about things they'd never said aloud. There were no grand gestures, no speeches. Just two women bound by blood and life, learning each other anew. By spring, Marianne had a series of landscapes pinned to the cabin wall. A few neighbors, retired couples and scattered artists, visited now and then. One, a former gallery owner, asked if she'd ever consider showing her work. Marianne laughed. "I'm 69. That part of life is over, isn't it?" The woman smiled gently and said, "Who told you that?" It struck her then how much of her life had been shaped by invisible rules. What was appropriate? What was expected? What had an expiration date? She had thrown all that away when she walked from her old home, but remnants still lingered in her thoughts. She began to rewrite those rules. On canvas, in conversations, in how she dressed, how she spoke, and how she allowed herself to feel joy. Marianne didn't become famous or rich. But she did become something far more rare, whole. For the first time in decades, her life felt like it belonged to her. And as she sat under the stars on her 70th birthday, wrapped in the same old flannel robe, sipping wine from a chipped mug, she whispered a truth to the night sky. I'm finally home.